that does not expect our inner cities to be a beautiful vineyard that can actually engage in God's Great Commission. That they have to constantly be a handout. You know, and all we believe, where God has brought us, no, we just need a hand up. You know, God has called you. God has given you the same Holy Spirit that He's given me. Now, your life might have went extremely different than the way mine was. You're not an Opie. You know, you're not Richie Cunningham. But a life has been radically changed. They have the Holy Spirit, which means that they've been given gifts. And then pastors need to come along, and their responsibility is to equip the saints for the work of ministry. Which means you got to identify the gift in someone in your group, equip them, train them, and then release them into the Great Commission harvest field. We are God's answer, or God's tool. No matter how jacked up we are, we're His plan. Every now and then we know some of the stories, especially in the 1040 window when we think internationally in the Muslim groups, where Jesus Himself comes in through a vision and transforms and wins that person to Himself. But by and large, it's the people of God that He uses. I've given you gifts. Now, use those gifts. Don't bury them. Get out there, because the harvest field is plentiful. So we're going on 8 billion people. And they think about, well, I don't know how they figure this out, but 2 billion might be what we would call the Christian faith. Now, that's also going to include the Catholic. So this is not a theological discussion on Catholicism or anything like that. Just the stats. They bring those two together. Protestant and Catholic together. So the harvest field is plentiful. The population clock, every minute, I don't know how many minutes, every minute 150 people are born in this world. So, you know, a little sidebar note here. I cannot understand why the denominations, the tribes, fight each other, trying to retain sheep that really is the Lord's sheep. It's so plentiful. There's so much need out there. If I were just to focus solely on the spiritual need, not just talking, physical need is another discussion, but just the spiritual need. Oh my gosh, we need everybody. We need to think and act. I'm going to get ahead of myself. Well, let me say it like this. I am part of a motif that's a part of my life, is a warfare motif. And I'm not a warmonger. Once again, I'm not a violent person. I've never killed anybody. Yeah. Like that. Yes. Has Opie ever done anything? In fact, I love kittens. I'm that type of guy. But if you think about World War II, which is way before our time, but if you did any history, that there were two forces. Historians write about two forces. There's the Allied forces, and then there's the Axis forces. That's how the church, I believe, needs to think. We are the Allied forces. It is the only time in history, in a world war, and that's how we have to look at this planet. There is a prince of the power of this world. He is called that in the book of Peter, which means that's after the cross. After Christ has won the victory, he still is called the prince of the power of the air, actually. And then he's also called the God of this age in Corinthians. So he is still active and alive, and this whole small blue planet is his. And he holds people in bondage, and then God has said, I've got my Axis forces. So in World War II, this world war in the physical world, if you kind of transfer a little bit over into the spiritual world, that the realities kind of fit well together, it's the only time in history where there was a supreme commander, Eisenhower, Ike, who gathered the leaders of the other nations, all type A people. And they're just going at it. But when push came to shove, Ike had to make decisions. But the church, we fight each other. You know, if you don't think about this as a warfare and not even an urgency, but you've got to go past urgency to an emergency. These are very, very critical times. Christ is risen. He is Lord. He is coming back. And everyone at some point will face him. Decisions will be made. Welcome into the joy of my kingdom, or depart from me, I never knew you. There is no purgatory. There is no other option. And so we need the Methodists. We need the Presbyterians. That's that allied forces. Our uniquenesses gathered together rather than shooting each other in the back, because there's only one Axis force. There was only one Hitler, and he wanted to rule the world. He was ruthless. He was evil. And it's in carrying my analogy forward, that's exactly who our spiritual enemy is. And that's Satan. So, backtracking just a little bit. 1992, we declare ourselves a Christian missions organization. And we began down this path to plant churches. We felt like we understood the city, the poor, the needs, the social injustices, the systems that were at work. We were incarnational. So we had a ton of experiences. And we also just had and we still do, we have a very solid theological base on which to address the issues that are taking place in our inner cities. But we began to shift very strongly this huge Titanic to being this ministry that's going to now plant churches. So we began to put some structures in place, some initiatives, some resources, and we began to realize, we're not a denomination, we're not a tribe, and we do not plant world impact churches. So that is a little bit of a problem, because a church cannot be siloed. It just cannot stand on its own. If you think about lions, or this group of lions going after these water buffalo or something, you might have seen the pictures. Who do they attack?
Stragglers.
The stragglers, the weak. They don't go for the big bunch. They're eyeing, they're crouching, they're looking for this wandering weak one, and that's who they take out. And so we had a problem as a Christian missions organization. Man, if we're going to plant as many churches as we can as quickly as possible, we need to partner. That is our small slice to the kingdom's expansion in these allied forces that, man, we can call the Air Force, we can call the Navy, we can call the Navy SEALs. We can partner with anybody as long as they're committed to what the church has believed everywhere, always, and by all. It would, for a local church like this, is probably your statement of faith. We believe in the Trinity. We're Trinitarian. So if a group comes to us, which I just had this, any of you all know the oneness theology? Okay, well, some of you do, some of you. Basically, oneness theology is God the Father, when, I'll try to simplify it best, when he was done, became Jesus Christ.
Oh, no Trinity. Got it.
Modalism.
Yeah, modalism, thank you. It's called oneness, it's usually the Holiness Pentecostal group. Now, we're not going to work with them, because the church, everywhere, always, and by all, where the ancient creeds defended the Trinity. So we're going to defend that. We're going to die for that. You know, that's what the church believed. That's who we're going to partner with. So we began to plant churches in partnership with all kinds of tribes / denominations and associations, networks, things like that. Along the way, I met my bride in 1990. 1990, yes. She came on summer staff. She is from Holland, Michigan, actually a small little town called Borculo. Her father owned a little farm out there. Actually, part of the family, I was telling the table